So she wrote him a letter, and she baked him a cake. And here is the letter. If you can't read it here, I'll try and read it for you. Hey there, I hope you're well. We haven't formally met, and I hate we're doing so under these circumstances. When you come home every evening and blast music, I've come to expect. Sometimes it's a song I haven't heard for a while, and I appreciate the throwback. Other times it's something I've never heard before. I've been able to Google a few lyrics and add it to my weekly playlist. To be fair, you've helped me to catch my eye. But last night, you tried it. You really, really did. Now, I don't know if you're holding the official after party for our building's holiday social or single-handedly determining this generation's R&B king. But 3 a.m. It's just too late to be this loud. At 3:26, I couldn't tell if you were playing some up-tempo hits from the weekend or if you pushed shuffle on some house technical. Either way, I could have done without that part of the set. At 3:47, I realized it was much more advantageous to reflect on your musical tastes than eat potato chips and try and sleep. You really love a piano solo and some soulful drums. At 3:55, I should be dreaming about all the things I want Michael Jordan or Malik Gilbert to do to me. I should be dreaming about the life I could have with Lena Waithe if only she was single. I should not be singing Maxwell's Ascension simply because you want to be the second floor DJ. At 4:07, you settled down. I really appreciated that. In the future, as you're hosting your kickbacks and come-throughs, please remember the rest of us. As a peace offering, I hope you'll enjoy this pound cake. At 3:30, when I decided to bake it for you, I realized I was taking your feelings into much more consideration than you were taking mine. I hope this changes, especially since I'm only 3 months into a 13-month lease. Happy holidays, and I look forward to officially meeting you soon. So, that was her move, which is not quite the standard move in these circumstances. She was tweeting again the next day with an update, and the update was that there was no update. She'd knocked on his door, and he hadn't replied, so he was probably out. People were saying that what she was doing was sort of really exaggerated, going a bit too far. But she said, him throwing a party at 3 a.m. is going too far too. Couldn't she have just gone and knocked on the door? Well, she says, no, she doesn't know who this guy is, and going out in a dark apartment building at 3 a.m. to knock on some unknown guy's door might not work out really well. She could call the police. She said, yeah, but usually the police have this habit of killing black people. She's black, he's black. She thinks that getting him killed is probably, it's exaggerated, it's going too far. So, what happened next? She was hoping he was going to eat the cake, but she didn't know if he'd done that. But she did notice that the music had got a lot soft. And then she tweets again. I just met my neighbour Tommy. He's so cool. He apologised for the noise, promised to invite me to the next party, and most importantly, he said my cake was amazing. So this is the two of them, and I think it was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. So, you can play the disagreement game by the standard rules. You can even try and have cool, rational discussions, like I said last time. We know that doesn't work. You can play it by the standard rules and scream at each other, but that tends not to work either. She framed it in a humorous, warm way, and this was the result. We hope it lasts. So that was a nice, feel-good disagreement. But of course, some disagreements can be absolutely deadly. And I've seen people in this room too suggest that these deadly disagreements, as in the case of civil wars, unresolved. They're completely intractable. Well, from the end of the last century, I feel very old when I say that, but the end of the last century, we have at least 2 cases where seemingly intractable agreements were actually solved in a way which might not have been perfect, but which was pretty good. One case was South Africa with Nelson Mandela, but it doesn't take a saint. Another case was Northern Ireland in Great Britain, where I come from, and the people involved were distinctly non-saintly, but they managed to do it anyhow. So this is the third story I'm going to tell you this afternoon. And before I actually get into the story, back there. This is Great Britain. It's not very big, you know. Philippines is actually a bigger area. This island, we've only got one of these big islands, we're not like you, is called Ireland. And it was colonized by the British centuries and centuries ago. And the British filled the northern part of the island, this bit here, with Protestant Scottish settlers, so who were pretty poor, but they gave these Scottish settlers privileges. You have privileges in power. If you go and beat up your Catholic neighbours, no one's going to complain. We give you better housing than everybody else. We give you better work than anyone else. Our police force is all Protestant, and so on and so forth. So the Catholic majority of the country, the colonised, were deeply, deeply unhappy with this. And in the 1920s, so that's 100 years ago, or actually during World War I, 1914, their unhappiness exploded into an armed rebellion. The rebellion won. They actually managed to achieve independence for the south of the island, which is the part where they were the majority. In the north, the Protestants were the majority, and the north stayed part of Britain. But in Northern Ireland, Catholics continued to suffer. They were discriminated against, so they couldn't get access to housing, the healthcare wasn't so good. Whatever it was, they had less of it. And so there were all sorts of extremely militant outbreaks among the Catholics, particularly from the 1960s onwards, when they started a very strong campaign for civil rights. They wanted to have equal rights to the Protestants, and the Protestants fought back, and the British absolutely supported the Protestants. So the Catholics started fighting not just the Protestants, but also the British Army. So militant groups were formed on both sides. The Catholic side, it was called the IRA. The Protestant side, there were several different movements, but they were all equally murderous. And none of these people were nice on either side. There was murder on both sides, there was torture on both sides. And the IRA actually took their military campaign onto the British mainland with a significant number of bomb attacks, which killed a large number of people, including civilians, and also with fake bomb attacks which paralyzed the British economy. So their typical mode of operation would be they would phone the police and say that there is a bomb in St Pancras Station, and there would be a large plastic box. There was nothing inside the box, but that would force people to evacuate the station. No one could get home from work, and so on and so forth. So this caused great fear and disruption. It was a very, very effective tactic. And in 1972, things got worse. There was a purely peaceful Catholic march for civil rights, and the British Army opened fire on the march and killed 12 unarmed civilians who were there, which obviously made the violence much worse, because the Catholics later fought back, and many Catholics thought the only possible reaction to this is armed struggle. So it was a wonderful recruiting device for the IRA. So there were many victims on both sides. Between this in 1972 and the peace, which came in 1998, there were nearly 4,000 dead, and about half of these were civilians. So the problem seemed completely intractable, and it was made worse by the education system and by the churches on both sides. The education system, if you went to a Catholic school, everyone went to religious schools. If you went to a Catholic school, you were taught a history of British imperialism, how the British had oppressed the Irish, killed them, murdered them, how the British had caused the great Irish potato famine, which killed 1.5 million people in the 19th century, and so on and so forth. Most of this was true. And if you were a Protestant, you learned all about how we have colonized this country, this is our country, the other people, we are the bosses, blah, blah, blah. And you would also learn about how revolting Catholics had killed Protestants and committed atrocities, and this was also true. So they had different versions of history. And sadly, the churches on both sides made it worse, like these officially Christian churches, Catholic and Protestant, both treated the other side as though they weren't Christians. Well, they actually said explicitly the Protestants denied that the Catholics were Christians at all, and vice versa. And they thought murdering the heathen was basically perfectly okay. But then, by the late 1970s, early 1980s, things began to change, thank goodness, because it was awful. And all sorts of things were happening in the economy and in politics. So Northern Ireland was getting poorer because no one wanted to invest in this country with a civil war going on. And therefore, because it was poorer, there was also much less interest to Britain than it used to be. So the British started thinking, why bother fighting for this place? They thought maybe keeping the army there and taking all the people, all the dead soldiers, just wasn't worth it. And the Protestants also began to realize that the British were not going to stay there forever. So that was one thing. At the same time, the Southern Irish got richer. Ireland had joined the European Union, the European Community, and they were growing very rapidly. A lot of the poverty had gone, so whereas previously Northern Ireland was rich and Southern Ireland was poor, now they were approximately the same. And at the same time, things were changing. A new Catholic party arose. It was called the Social Democratic and Labour Party. It, just like the militants, just like the terrorists in inverted commas, they too wanted a united Ireland. They too wanted to get rid of the British. But there were two huge differences. They wanted to do it through the ballot box, they wanted to do it with a vote, and they said that even if we won a vote, no agreement is ever going to work, no solution is ever going to work unless the Protestants accept it. And this was a massive change. But previously the militants had said, basically we wipe out the Protestants. We destroyed them, we forced them to go back to England. Now they were saying, we have to make an agreement with the Protestants. This was a radically new frame. At the same time, the IRA, too, the military branch of the Catholics, was changing its line. The British military were pretty effective. They killed a lot of these terrorists. At the same time, they started off with huge support from the population. I've met people who said, "Oh, I just left my door open every night so the boys could come in after they'd shot a couple of soldiers." You know, it was really fish swimming in the sea. But sort of gratuitous violence, gratuitous murders. They also killed collaborators. Was not welcome to the Catholic population. And people began to move away from that. And so the leaders of the movement, a man called Gerry Adams, started thinking that maybe there could be a solution. And he started talking to John Hume, who was the leader of the Social Democratic Party. And they talked and talked and talked. And something which helped a lot was that John Hume, who was very much a moderate, he wasn't a lefty at all, had very good channels to the American government. And the American government had very good channels to the British government. And of course, there's a lot of Irish, there's a lot of Catholic Irish in the United States, and they were all pushing. But somehow, this solution, this war had to be ended. And so in 1993, Gerry Adams, the head of the Irish, of the military faction, basically, he wasn't official, he was de facto, and John Hume put out a joint statement where they said, and this was huge, as leaders of our respective parties, we've told each other we see the task of reaching agreement on a peaceful and democratic accord for all on this island is our primary challenge. So, we want an agreement. We don't want military victory. That's huge. We both recognize that such an agreement is only achievable and viable if we can earn and enjoy the allegiance of the different traditions on this island. That means the Catholics, all of them, and the Protestants, all of them, by accommodating diversity and providing for national reconciliation. So this was a huge step. This didn't resolve the whole problem, but it was a huge step forward. And what it meant was, they'd reframed the problem. What was the original frame? Both the Catholics and it was to win the war against the other side. So from the Catholics' point of view, Britain was an oppressive colonial power. It ran a regime full of discrimination and lack of civil rights. The Protestants were allied to the British. We had to unify Ireland, basically get rid of the British and the Protestants. From the Protestant point of view, Britain was protection against Catholic terrorism. Britain would protect Protestant economic and social rights by, for instance, not allowing Catholics access to housing. The Catholics were terrorists, and the basic goal was to kill them. And we needed to keep Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom. That was the original frame of the problem. Once Gerry Adams and John Hume issued their statement, the framing changed very fast. For the first time, all the governments involved accepted that, in principle, Ireland could be reunified. Remember, the South was Catholic, the North was Protestant. They said, in principle, it could be reunified. So, of course, that scared the Protestant people. So they added, there has to be a principle of consent. Northern Ireland can only change its status with the consent of the Northern Irish people. So as long as a majority of Northern Ireland doesn't want to unify, it won't unify. And that again was a huge change in the Catholic position. They said, we take Northern Ireland. Now they're saying, we may be unified, but only when everyone agrees. The UK government was going to reduce its role. There was going to be no more shooting. But there was a very important role played of actually disarming people. Very slowly, two sides began to disarm, and I'll talk about that in a second. There were a lot of political prisoners taken by the British. They had to be released. And Ireland was going to become a self-ruling place, run by an assembly where the two sides would come together. Now that was how it was framed. Fairly quickly, secret talks began between the terrorists and the British government, the Catholic terrorists and the British government. And there were lots of reports about this in the press, and the British government just lied through its teeth. We have no talks with terrorists. Boom, 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 boom. It was being mediated by the Americans, and they were talking all the time. And in '94, the IRA announced a complete ceasefire. The next day, Protestants announced their ceasefire. And in what date was it? 1998, I think. 1998. We got to an agreement, and not quite there. So, were negotiations to really reach a lasting peace agreement with Northern Ireland. And it's interesting because here too was reframing on a much smaller scale and was real deceptive practice for good reasons. So at the very end of the negotiations, Protestants really were refusing to sign. They say this is not enough. They were worried that there would be lots of concessions to the Catholics while the Catholics still had weapons and so on. So the British and Irish governments gave the US head of negotiations, it was being mediated by the US, they gave him a proposal for peace, which was very, very pro-Catholic. And he said, please present this proposal as your own. So he presented this as the compromise position, which was basically, we give the IRA everything it wants. He presents this, which came from the British government, and the British Prime Minister immediately said, oh, this is a dreadful proposal. It's far too pro-Catholic. We have to refuse it. In this way, he rescued, in inverted commas, the peace process. Because he'd rejected this awful American proposal, the Protestants said, this is a victory, and they accepted the agreement. But all the main clauses of the agreement were the same as before. So prisoners were going to be released, the weapons were going to be decommissioned, and the Catholics said, this is a victory! When they could both say it was a victory, then they signed. So, on Good Friday, 1998, these three people, John Hume, his counterpart among the Protestants, whose name I've forgotten, and Tony Blair, who looks much younger and more handsome than he does today. And this was, Tony Blair, I can't stand him. But this was the one very, very good thing he did. He did achieve peace in Northern Ireland. They signed this agreement, and amazingly, the agreement is full, as hell. Northern Ireland has been almost no killings in Northern Ireland since the time of this agreement. The Northern Ireland economy is doing well. The Southern Ireland Irish economy is also doing well. And amazingly, this is the head of the Protestant murderers, basically, Protestant terrorists. This is the deputy head of the Catholic terrorists. He was actually the military head, the one who organized the killings. Look at that. And they actually became close friends. And when Ian Paisley died, the Guinness was the eulogy for his funeral. So it wasn't fake. This wasn't politicians pretending to agree with each other. They actually managed to agree with each other, which I think is pretty amazing. So, where do we go from there? Lessons learned. Many disagreements are intractable or unproductive so long as the participants keep to the original frame. If this is a real polyhedron is made of this, you just say that dogmatically. If you say, thou shalt not make music at 3 a.m. in the morning, you stick to that. Or you say, the British are the enemy, or you say, the Irish are the enemy, you get nowhere. This way, the agreement cannot be solved. But, these are the examples. If we reframe our problem, we ask a new question, we look at it in a different light, then sometimes, not always, we can reach an agreement. So, we can introduce new definitions of what we mean by a polyhedron. We can, instead of talking about rules about not making music, we can talk about cakes and fun. We can reframe a problem from how to kill the other side, so how we can exactly formulate working together. You know, there were huge technical problems to be resolved. Both sides had huge quantities of weapons. How do we get rid of this? Neither of them were prepared to give them to the police or the army, because they said we'll just get arrested or they'll shoot us. You know, there was terror and total distrust of the police and the army. What happened? The Canadians came along. They set up an army base in Ireland, and both sides would bring their weapons to the Canadians. The Canadians would certify that the weapons had been given in and would destroy the weapons. They would give the certificate to the other sides in the dispute, say, look, they've just destroyed 200 machine guns. And the Canadians were trusted by everybody, so everyone took this as real. So they managed to destroy their weapons a little at a time. You know, I destroyed 200 machine guns, so you destroyed 200 machine guns. I destroyed a ton of high explosives, you destroyed a ton of high explosives, and so on. There was a lot of really creative thinking for how to diffuse the tension and everything else. And actually, this actually worked, so it was a huge success. Now, remember, on my lesson on Monday, for those who were here, I talked about the Japanese game of Go. The Japanese game of Go, it's unlike football or basketball or boxing. In all these games, you aim to just beat your opponent. But very often in Go, when it's played at a high level, your aim is really to produce a beautiful game. So a Go player is very disappointed if he just wins by a huge amount. That would probably because the other player made a stupid mistake. Ideally, you come really close, one player wins by a tiny margin, and you produce something which in the aesthetics of Go can be a beautiful game. If I look at the case of the mathematicians, that's what they're doing. Though I have to admit there's a little bit of imagination by Mr. Lakatosh, who probably makes it even more beautiful than it was in real life. But the act of creating something is joyful. And I think the act of finding solutions in the other two disputes we talked about, the Congo dispute and the dispute in Northern Ireland, is also joyful. But this, of course, is not actually a new discovery. So, about 2,600 years ago, in Athens, we had a huge conglomeration of people who left a mark in history, one of whom was Plato. We all know that the rest of philosophy was just a footmark after Plato. The rest of white Western philosophy was just a footmark in the complete works of Plato. And there were philosophers, there were literary figures, there were poets. And according to Plato, one evening they all meet together in a huge hall to eat, drink, and be merry, and to argue with each other. That's so much fun. That's their ideal version of pleasure. And Plato talks about that in his Symposium, which I've also added the translation of the Symposium to your reading materials. I do suggest you sample the reading materials. It's not an exam requirement. You get no extra points for doing it. You don't lose anything if you don't do it. But there's some really interesting texts in there. I suggest you just sample it. Rethink if you find something pleasant or interesting or stimulating, you read it. And if not, you move on to something else. There's very technical stuff, there's stuff which is pure fun. I think the Symposium is pretty much on the lines of fun, but of course, there's no accounting for taste. Now, the Symposium is rigorously unserious. We can find serious philosophical discussions elsewhere in place, but not really in the Symposium. But a lot of it is about a debate they launched about what is love. And each of the participants is invited to tell a story about what is there. And I'm not sure if this has really changed the way people relate to each other. In fact, let's be honest, I'm pretty sure it hasn't. But it has given us lots of interesting language, which we still use today to discuss love. So one of the participants, Aristophanes, told this huge, purely invented story. This was his contribution to the debate about how one day Zeus was really upset with humans because they were up, they kept on rebelling against the gods, not making proper sacrifices and not treating them properly. They didn't build in big enough temples and so on and so forth. So he said, right, I've had enough of you lot. I'm going to split. And at that time, humans had no sex. They were asexual or something, hermaphrodite. I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure how they reproduce, but never mind. But anyway, they weren't male and they weren't female. And he said, I'm going to split each one of you into two separate halves. And then, you nasty people, I'm going to condemn you to go wandering round the world looking for your better half. You've heard that word before? That's where it came from. When finally, after many difficulties, you meet your other half, the actual half of himself, whether he be a lover of youth, which I think means whether he's a man who likes boys, or whether a lover of another sort, the unconventional sort who like girls, the pair will be lost in an amazement of love and friendship and intimacy, and one will not be out of the other sight, as I may say, even for a moment. So he sees that this sort of passage, and the idea which is contained in this passage, has been repeated 100 times throughout Western literature. When you talk about your better half or your other half, that's where it comes from, even today. So even these sort of very literary disagreements in the symposium, which were largely for fun, can also be extremely productive. Now, today's the feel-good day. Our disagreements today all end well. They all end happily, and so on. Not all disagreements are like that. I think it's completely wrong to think that in all cases we must find there is some nice creative solution which resolves everything. It isn't like that. Sometimes I think there are very strong justifications for sticking to your guns and just keeping to your position. Philosophers have called this the steadfast position. And sometimes the steadfast position really wins. So sometimes you win by making an agreement, by having fun making an agreement. Sometimes you win by avoiding it and really pushing for your own position. But I'm also going to show, even here, it's often very, very useful to be flexible and ready to reframe the way the objectives you're pushing for. You should be, maybe to use a Chinese metaphor, you shouldn't sort of be like a steamer trying to steam up the stream against the current. You should be more like a clever boatman or kayak rider who uses the current to go downstream. So you have to be flexible enough to use the way the current moves. That's the story I'm going to be talking about next week. Next week on Monday, when we're going. The story is all about the campaign for gay rights and gay marriage. So that's what I have to say for today. But I hope to have provoked you a bit, and maybe someone has some suggestions or questions. By the way, the lectures always come online immediately after the lecture or in the 24 hours after the lecture. You know we're trying to make a book out of this. The book will not be just a transcription of the lectures, but we'll try and improve them. So on the one hand, if you have any comments or suggestions, I think this is wrong, or I have another example I could give, please add comments to the document. If some of you want to do some formal writing and produce a case, a discussion of a case, we can actually make part of the book. We would really like to hear from you. Please talk to me or talk to Jack. So, your questions? Yes?
I wanted to ask about to what extent a question can be rephrased before it starts to get unreasonable. Because you did mention that not all disagreements end in a resolution. So at what point should one side decide to just take the loss?
Okay, that's of course, actually, it's a good question. So I look at all sorts of solutions. Basically I consider three in the lectures, and one I don't consider, and maybe I should, so your question talks to that. The first one is we make a creative agreement, like we do. The second one, which I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, is I fight and I win. And the third one is I walk away. We will get to that another time. But here's a fourth one. Maybe I make an agreement where I just take a loss, which is not really reframing it. The guy says, you have a house which is worth 100. The guy says, I'm going to buy it from you for 60. And in the end, you're tired of arguing, and you just say, okay, 60. We call that philosophy. We call that defeat. That's when you just accept that you've lost your argument. It's not worth fighting for. Now, there's a big difference. We can also have defeat where you don't even complete. So he says 60, I say 100. We agree on 70 or 75. But I think there's a very big difference between splitting the difference. So just making a compromise where I lose a bit and you lose a bit. And sort of situations I'm talking about here, which are really win-win. When I talk about the math, there's no loser there. There's no loser in the apartment battle, and there's no loser in the Northern Ireland. Everyone wins, so they haven't split the difference. Now, your question is about when is it worth splitting the difference. I think that's linked. Splitting the difference is a bit like walking away. I think there's cases where you might just say, I'll talk about this more in my very last lecture. That's not Monday, Wednesday next week, where it should be there. I think there's cases where it was just so unimportant, it's really not worth fighting about. So there's a case in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy where they talk about the restaurant check case. So my friend, we're sharing out the cost of the meal. We say we're all going to pay equally. We're not going to worry about who had water, who had wine. We're just going to share. Fine. My friend does the calculation and he works out it costs $45 each. Oh, I do the calculation and it works out at $43 each. And then there's this huge discussion. Should I accept my friend's point of view or should I stick to my guns? Well, $2 ain't that much. So some cases where the issues are very minor, I really think a wise solution can be just not argue. But I think there's other cases where, I think the case of gay marriage is one, where some of your survival it's not even a moral thing, it's your survival as a state. Can I exist as a group? Are you allowing me to exist? Gay marriage is one. Black communities in South Africa during apartheid is another. Anyone who's deeply, deeply oppressed may feel that I have no choice. I'm in a genocidal situation. Either I fight back or I disappear. And most people there, I think, will say, I can't half the difference. I can't accept that you give me just a few minor rights that we carry on as before. I need something more than that. So I don't think there's no one answer to this. Certainly, it can be right to split the difference, but equally certainly it's not always right to do that. That was a good question. Yes.
So could it be a best refrain between China and 60-40 joint exploration within the split islands in the West Philippines? It's Chinese claiming under the 9-line and Philippines was claiming within 200 nautical miles under the nation laws.
Yeah.
The content agreement wherein they would explore it's the sharing of the 60-40 percentage. Would that be
So,
this kind of refrain from
that I think that would be a splitting the difference agreement, and it might be okay, it might not be, and we can argue how we split, 60-40, is it 55-45 or whatever. And I don't think there's any right answer about that. It can't. But in an ideal world, I think if we were really looking for a good agreement, we need something which is a win-win. So this is basically a lose-lose. Splitting the difference is a lose-lose. We all accept to give up something. A win-win is if we say, but if we work together, we can maybe be much better in exploiting the mineral resources of this area. Or we can do things, if we can find something we can do together which we just can't do separately, that would be a win-win. Or if we can get together, for instance, to stop overfishing, which is a massive problem. And even if the whole of the South China Sea belonged to China, overfishing would be a huge problem for the Chinese. And even if it all belongs to the Philippines, overfishing is a problem for the Philippines. So I think if you want to win-win, you have to find something where both sides actually are better off than without an agreement. That doesn't mean that what you're suggesting is wrong. Maybe it's the only way you can actually do it, given the constraints. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I'm just asking whether it's possible to find anything even better. So the Northern Ireland thing, I think, is better than that.
I have points to raise about two things. The first one is about the mathematics example and how it can be productive. Certainly, I can imagine or I can give some examples in philosophy where the exchange between the two sides leads to some discovery, some greater understanding.
Actually, I think Jackie and I would both say that our exchange to actually build this series of lectures is an example of that. We're not teaching what we knew a year ago, we're teaching what we discovered in our very unviolent disagreements.
I'm not even sure it's not in a disagreement in certain points, but I think there comes, I think in professional disagreements, like in mathematics and in philosophy, we can find a point where it's very productive and people are going back and forth.
Engineering disciplines, in architecture, this sort of thing, are we going to build it a bit taller? Are we going to make the walls thicker?
But then it does reach a certain point where it becomes stale. And we can have examples like that. Like, I think the worst kinds of hair-splitting distinctions in scholastic philosophy, for instance. And in analytic philosophy, there's also sections like that. Like, there's an interesting argument, and then, it leads to a productive discussion. And then it becomes, I think it kind of reaches a point where the disagreement is even artificial. Yeah. It becomes kind of like technicality for technicality's sake.
Yeah.
And I think it might be interesting to explore how we can describe when that happens and kind of identify what goes wrong and why we ended up that way and what happens when we go the other direction where the points of disagreement actually matter to more than like a few very technical people. Technically trained people. So that's one point I want to raise. The other, I think I made a comment in the slides from last Monday. I think in the Go imagery, where it's like the goal is to play a beautiful game where you capture as much of the board as possible. and you try to surround your opponent and so on. I think it's a kind of possibility in
Your
disagreement.
beauty is actually where you both capture almost an equal part.
Yes, yes. But this is only possible when the participants or the players involved are equally or well matched. Right?
Yes.
So I think in cases of disagreement where there's a significant disparity in ability, access to resources and other things, I think the
Maybe very
dynamic
hard.
changes, and I don't think the resulting exchange can be beautiful. Harvey Parafina raised that question in the open lecture that he gave in the beginning, and he was saying something like, well, if you look at disagreements concerning the drug war, for instance, there are disparities in the groups that are talking about this. If we
But
look
make
at
it very hard to have this creative discussion.
Yes.
I think that's true.
Yes. And if we have highly contentious issues like how do we deal with cases of abuse of power and sexual misconduct in communities like the Catholic Church, or how do we handle forms of wrongdoing that we're investigating? Are we opening that up to discussion, or are we limiting access to information? Right? All the time, there's a difference between resources and access, and power, really. So the exchange is going to be, it's very difficult to have a kind of discussion.
I totally agree. And in all the cases we're talking about this creative thing, there's a frame of reference which is in common. So in the Northern Ireland thing, they both wanted peace. In the Congo, they were probably both cool people who didn't like quarreling, and the quarrel was inadvertent. Mathematicians, that's what they're there for. This is the whole point of the exercise. And many professional discussions, we actually enjoy doing it, but we have a common frame of reference. We have a common idea of what is a beautiful discussion, a common idea of what is a beautiful building if we're architects, or a stable bridge if we're engineers, or a good computer program. There's beautiful programs and ugly programs, and we sort of know what it is. And when I disagree with you, I'm helping to get towards your goal as well as my goal. And where there's a huge power disparity, maybe it's also very, very hard to have a common goal.
Yeah, and one of the goals of the more powerful group would be to keep that power. Right?
Yeah.
And in that sense, it cannot be a shared power. Right?
And very often, the powerful group is very unwilling to reframe its questions. They say, now you should reframe your question.
Well, when you were discussing these examples of creative disagreements, I was thinking of a couple of thinkers. The first one is Bergson, and the other one is Weston. It's very interesting because, especially their work on humor, and basically to summarize, for Bergson, he always argued that laughter is a corrective measure of man. And if we can laugh at things, it's because it's an intellectual exercise. There's an emotional distance.
Yeah.
So when you were discussing the case of the Cathos and the musician and even the Irish, when they started to, it appears that they start to remove their bets from their horses, so to speak. There's an emotional distance, and they try to look at it at a more intellectual level. Then they start to laugh at that disagreement, and then they arrive at an agreement. And it's very interesting because for Koestler also, he tries to understand laughter as a disagreement between the spectrum of the ha moment. When I tell you a joke, for example,
when you get the joke.
The joke. When I tell a joke, the ha moment is basically I don't get what you're trying to say. So for example, the setup.
Yeah.
Then when you receive the punchline, you receive the moment. Then the catharsis starts. And I've always noticed that when a joke is offensive, it is at moments when there's no emotional distance. So for example, among people, for example, that never experience rape or never experience violence, if you joke, for example, a rape joke, it can be treated as a laughing matter because there's no emotional distance. But if you tell that same joke to a rape victim, the emotional distance is not there. So I'm curious if is creative disagreement possible, or rather, for at least how I hear your examples, at least it appears that you have to achieve that level of creative or emotional distance in order to achieve that creative disagreement. Because if you have an original idea, even in our professional sphere, if you have an original idea and in Tagalog, pinepersonal, parang feeling pinepersonal ka.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how
you make it personal.
You make it personal. Like the attacker is not on your point, but on the person. So I'm curious if
this emotional detachment is necessary to do it.
To laugh at it, to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
I'm not sure the Irish would have laughed at their disagreements. They'd had lots of dead. A lot of them had relatives who were dead, kids who were dead, parents who were dead. So laughing is maybe. But a certain level, I think you're not wrong. A certain level of emotional detachment, maybe, if you're too much into your thing, because I know this is true, end of story. Well, then the reframing, which I think is a fundamental part of getting to your agreement, is not going to happen. I once taught English to a couple. He was a Peruvian poet, and he had a wife. And he came from a farming background. He came from a very poor family. And it was the wife. And the wife learned English. They took lessons together. The wife, after about 6 weeks, was speaking very good English. And the Peruvian poet, after a whole year, spoke no English at all. He had made no progress with respect to where he was at the beginning. And I think the difference was the wife had no emotional attachments to words. So it was una casa, or it's a house. That was for her precisely the same thing. But whenever I tried to tell the poet that la casa, no, it's not a casa. It's like English. It's a house. When I said that, he got all upset because he can see.
He can't let go of that.
He can see la casa, but he can't see the house. And has deep emotional attachment to la casa. So
there's a disagreement between the two.
There's disagreement, but he couldn't let go, and he couldn't reach a compromise on this. I think because of his deep emotional attachment to certain things. And if we're attached to a scientific idea, I know scientists. Science is meant to be the objective search for knowledge. Scientists hate each other. You get two neuroscientists with two different theories. They will say the other one is stupid. He's never studied. I quote someone who doesn't have a name. You have never made a contribution to the field in 40 years. The guy has so many prizes all lined up. The other guy said, you've never made a contribution to the field. And of course, the reply to that was just as violent. So they can't get attached to it, and they can't reach a solution. In that particular case of the neuroscience, it was terrible because these two people could have been so useful to each other, and they failed. Of course, that's another case I haven't really examined. So I talk about reaching agreement, sticking to your guns, walking away. I haven't just talked about failure. Maybe we should, because there's a lot of cases where it just fails. Yes.
On the point of artificiality, when we keep changing the problem and redefining the problem, don't you think at some point we just forget about the original problem altogether and just create a new problem and solve that and think it's a victory?
Yes. Of course we do. Have you ever had a disagreement with a close friend? And did you ever remember at the end of the evening how it started? So you can do that. It can be a sign that you're not very rational, but none of us are, so that's not serious. I think we judge by the consequences. If this makes you just go around in circles and you go nowhere, that's bad. I don't think you should arbitrarily, continuously change your point of view. But if sort of jointly you change your respective points of view in a way which is productive, helps you to move towards an agreement, then it's very useful. And if you forget where you started from, not serious. We all forget where we started. I have to remember 6 lectures. Okay. The questions get better and better every week, yeah.
Going back to one of the earlier lectures, you given fast thinking and slow thinking, and with these points brought up about the emotional distance to a certain disagreement, or how do we judge if we not reached a point in our disagreement where it's become arbitrary, or we've built strong men that easily you can tear down? Could it be that it's all about going back to that, acknowledging the process we take in terms of our approach towards the disagreement? Going to the examples given in this lecture, each one is, to me, at least appears to me, an exchange between two parties that are almost completely, or except the second one, there's some weird things to consider there, but there's an exchange that I'm seeing that can only happen if there was a recognition of a problem in which both could have, could only be agreed upon if both were like sitting down, or at least figuratively sitting down and actually looking at the problem.
You mean sort of if they engaged in slow thinking?
Or acknowledging when it's best to go into slow thinking. Because I also, another thing I want to bring up is knowing when to leave a disagreement, but not just leaving it, but recognizing when we can go back to it now.
Actually, this is sort of the switch between slow and fast thinking. And I think it's almost impossible that fast thinking is ever going to bring one of these radical reframings, except maybe by accident. But usually, your fast thinking is everything you're saying is connected, because you say emotional detachment, but your fast thinking is not emotionally detached. You're not detached at all. Your fast thinking is you hit me, I hit you. So yes, we need to go into slow thinking mood, which if we are very emotional about our problem, we probably can't do. We find that very hard to get. So we need some sort of external pressure. Maybe just either the problem is very exciting, like the mathematicians, or it's very serious, like the peacemakers. They had to make peace somehow. So this is so serious. I'm going to conquer my emotions. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it. And I think one of the other things you said is very interesting. Sometimes we're not ready to do it yet. We need to. And we get this, for instance, there's a lot of work being done on scientists thinking about problems and mathematicians thinking about problems. Very often, they tell you the best thing to do is to leave the problem for a while. You just can't solve it, because when you're working on it, have any of you ever programmed? Any of you done computer science? Yeah. So you get to your thing, you can't see what's wrong. It doesn't work, but it has to work, because it doesn't. It has to work, but it doesn't. And you get the same in math. This is obviously true, but it's not. And so on. And when you think about it on the day, or maybe on the week or the year, there seems to be absolutely no solution. So you leave it on one side. On one day, you're either sleeping, or you're walking through the forest, or whatever, and suddenly, the solution is just there, complete, with almost no work required. All you have to do is tidy it up, because you just know it's true. And I think this can also happen in things with people. You can have a break. You can say, we're just disagreeing too much. You meet the guy after another year, or 6 months, or 6 weeks, or 6 hours, and suddenly, what were we disagreeing about? Where was the problem? You can carry on. This also happens. So I think taking a time out to let the slow thinking kick in and to cool down the fast thinking can sometimes be very, very useful.
I just wanted to comment on the tendency to blame emotions for not reaching creative agreements after disagreement. Because I imagine to reach a creative agreement or a creative solution, you need what I've seen to be called, seen somewhere to have been called epistemic openness. So it's a decision made on the level that is epistemic or rational and not necessarily an emotional adjustment.
So you need openness, you need to be able to listen to what the other guy's saying and try and understand it. There's the principle of charity, you know, when we talk, we are always ambiguous. It's impossible to say a sentence which no one can misinterpret. Now I say, what you say is very clever, and if the other guy is really negatively inclined, he will say, he's being snarky, he's being ironic, he's being sarcastic, he wants to show how clever he is. You know, there is nothing you can say which can't be misinterpreted. So you need to be charitable so that you can actually at least look whether it's possible to give a positive interpretation to what the guy's saying. And you have to inhibit some things, like we all tend to mind read. I see he replies in a certain way. I imagine why he's replying that way. He's doing it because he wants to get. He's doing it because I did that to him the other day. But it might not be true. We're extremely bad at mind reading. One of the things they tell you in psychotherapy is never try and read your opponent's mind. You know, it's really, none of us can do it. So that requires a certain detachment from emotions. I think there's an opposite side to this coin, which is we can't actually reason without emotions. Have any of you read Antonio Damasio? Yes. Okay, he's a neurologist. He's written a series of extremely good books. And one of the things he shows is that emotion is absolutely fundamental to reasoning. He starts his most famous book,
Descartes' Error.
Descartes' Error. Starts talking about the case of a man called Phineas Gage. He was a railroad worker in the States, and there's a terrible accident. An iron rod passes through his whole head. He recovers. Amazingly, he's not killed. He recovers. His intelligence is normal. His memory is normal. His reasoning power, his language is all normal. But his life falls apart. He loses his friends. His marriage breaks up. He goes with his kids. He loses all his money. He becomes an alcoholic. Why? Well, possibly, according to Damasio, because a certain part of the frontal lobes have been damaged, and this prevents him from feeling normal emotions. And Damasio had patients who had damage to this part of the brain who don't feel emotions. They're extremely rational. In fact, on some tests of rationality, they do better than normals. But they completely fail in lots of real-life tasks because they don't feel the positive emotion of doing something good. They don't feel the negative emotion when something is failing or when something is dangerous. Now, for all these things you're talking about, like having being epistemically open, or like taking a charitable position, or like not mind reading, you need a sort of positive emotion saying, it would be good if I did this, because all these things cost something. None of them are emotionally free. So you need some positive emotion to balance and say, this is really worth trying. You know, when I told these stories actually moved me emotionally. I find it great, you know. Sometimes things go right. They really do make me feel good. And I'm not saying that in a snarky or a sarcastic way. And I think those positive emotions can get us to good solutions. And I think that if we really become proper epistemologists with zero emotions, that basically means we're mentally sick. You know, we need emotions and we need to use them to get to good solutions. Of course, there's bad emotions as well. We need to use our good emotions to deal with the bad ones, but we can't live without them. And actually, do you know about the trolley problem?
No.
You all know about trolley problems. Well, when they test the trolley problem on people throughout the world, everyone who's mentally normal says, there's no way I'm going to move the lever or push the fat man off the bridge. You know, even if I save 3 lives and only kill 1, which is what a good utilitarian thinks, I can't do this. It's just too hard. So, from a utilitarian perspective, all of us who are faced with that problem, we're irrational because we actually lose lives. We refuse to commit the evil act of pushing 1 person or killing 1 person deliberately when it's going to be our fault.
Most people say they would not push
Yeah,
the large guy over the bridge,
yeah.
but most people say they're willing to
Pull a lever,
Yeah.
yeah. But when you do it with psychopaths, they're all very, very rational. Of course we have to save 3 lives. So they all give the rational answer. So, you know, our emotions do strange things. Any other questions? Okay, I have to thank you for your answers and your questions, because I really think that each lecture, the questions are a little bit more interesting than the ones before. They're getting better and better. Thank you. And they tend to build on the questions the time before, which is nice. So thank you very, very much. I will see you on Monday next week. Thank you.